Well, hello, everybody. This is Penny back again doing another conversation with, and somebody I'm very excited to be talking to today. And that will become clear as I do a bit more of an introduction. But actually, before I do that, I'd like to share a little bit about what's exciting for me in my life. And let me introduce you to Muppet. Muppet has won the golden ticket. Poppy has had 5 puppies. They're now 6.5 weeks old. And I say she's won the golden ticket because she is staying. So she's going to have a life of pampered luxury. And she's muchly loved already. As you can see, she's a little cutie. So this is what's very special in my life. I think it's going to be my birthday present to myself for this week, isn't it, darling? So there's little Muppet. I've introduced you, and I expect somebody will come in and be very kind and take her away, unless she happens to go to sleep here. So I wanted to just share that with you and say this is a bit special in my life right now. So who am I going to be talking to today, and why am I saying this is really special? I met Nicola, gosh, what must it be now? 4 or 5 years ago? I'm not very good at time, but something like that. And what's so special about it is that Nicola has not just been blown away by our program. She's put herself through becoming a trainer of the program. And where she's taking it is into schools, not just to teachers, which is wonderful, but actually to young people. And for those of you who know me and know our program, you know that my vision has always been, could this become part of the school curriculum, so that before every child leaves school, they would have the opportunity to get a few things straight in their mind. One is that they always have a choice. Secondly, they can choose to take responsibility for their own life and begin to create the life they want. And I think thirdly, and I don't know how else to phrase it, how critical it is to be kind to other people, to look for the good in them. And Nicola has delivered some programs to young people. So I think it's going to be very special to hear what impact does this have on young people. Sounds a bit crazy, doesn't it? Leadership for young people? What? Believe me, amazing. So that's why I'm so excited to welcome Nicola. So Nicola, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, Penny. Lovely to be here.
I am just going to ask you, is there any way that you can lighten? Have you got a light that you can put on in that room? It's quite, that's better. We can see your face now. We couldn't see your face very clearly, and that's very important. So, Nicola, I'm so delighted that you have offered to come and have a conversation with me. And I'm so convinced that the things that you can share with people, that they will find really, really interesting and useful for parents as well as leaders. So, Nicola, please spend a little bit of time doing an introduction and telling people who you are, a little bit about your background, your passion, and why you've decided to really become very involved in this route. So, Nicola, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here. I've watched these in the past, Penny, and it serves as a bit of a recharge and a refresher to hear different people's experiences. So thank you for inviting me. So yeah, I'm Nicola Taylor, and I currently work as strategic leader for SEND provision across a large group of schools in the northeast of England. So we have 39 schools in our multi-academy trust.
Wow.
I have always worked with children with special needs and disabilities and their families. I grew up as the eldest of a sibling set of 3 with parents who moved from the northwest down to Essex when I was small, and they were 2 individuals who really believed in the power of education to transform lives. My mum was a teacher, my dad wasn't, but they, being first generation to university themselves, they were really keen on the opportunity that education would offer and how it's really important to make the best of everything that's offered to you. So I think that's sort of characterized me as an individual all the way through my life and driven this desire to make a difference, really, as far as I can in interactions in everyday life, whether that's at work or at home and outside. So I decided to take the route to become a teacher of the deaf, which I qualified many years ago now, been a practitioner for a long time. And I think through the course of my years as a teacher of the deaf, I was really privileged in that I worked into a lot of family homes. And I saw the impact of challenging circumstances on families. And often I was working with the families of newly diagnosed deaf babies, so families who are adjusting to new challenges. And I think there I really started to understand the impact of being very present in the moment and listening. So I like to think that that has also characterized my life, that I've always firmly believed in the strength and power of really listening and seeing people. Because I would sometimes make preconceived decisions about what families might want to know. You know, they'll want to know whether their child can go to a mainstream school. They'll want to know whether their child can speak. And actually, often those weren't the things that were on their mind. So I was at risk of putting barriers up in the early years of doing that work. So anyway, we fast forward, I had my own children and started to see the impact of being a leader on my own children. I have 3 children who are now adults and making their own way in the world. And that was all going alongside my professional life. I moved up through the ranks working for local government, local authority around SEND provision, moved into strategic leadership, and that's where I encountered the Living Leader programme for the first time, and we met Penny. So the County Council were rolling out Living Leader as a programme they were hoping all of the workforce, and I was in the first group as a senior leader within the education services to go through that as a delegate. And it was like huge light bulb moments to me, because I suddenly felt that everything that I was trying to practice on a daily basis that was really sort of influencing me at home and at work was there in front of my eyes, with frameworks for, oh, I see now why I want to do that. I see now where I could do that better. I see now how those things all connect, and it allowed me to find hooks on which I could base my practice. So totally blown away by being a delegate on a PLP, and was very fortunate because I was offered the option to follow the trainer program, CTP. So I did that. Then fast forward again, and I moved into this new role within a group of schools, and introduced the Living Leader to the CEO of our trust very quickly once I started, because I was still burning with enthusiasm about the power of it in terms of changing culture and influencing culture in an organisation. So our CEO was very interested, and I think partly what we identified very early on was that our school leaders who were facing increasing challenges, there were programmes which taught people how to do the operational side of school leadership, but actually there weren't many programs out there that really focused on how you lead, the way in which you lead, and the way in which you bring people along and bring out the best in them. So Anita, our CEO, came and did a PLP and came back equally as fired with enthusiasm as me, and that's where it started at Bishop Bewick. So we've subsequently, over 3 years, we have offered the PLP to all of our school head teachers and deputy heads, senior leaders, people within the Central Trust. I think we're up to about 125 people now. And last year, we talked with yourself and with Emma at Living Leader about the potential of rolling out to some students, because I think the Future Leaders programme was fairly new in its infancy. So we said that we would give it a go. Lots of reasons for that, Penny. Firstly, that I felt that a lot of the content of the Living Leader programme would be really relevant to the teenagers today. And actually, the world that they face is increasingly challenging. and we see that within our schools. So, and Anita and I together saw the potential of this for adding some depth to the thinking of some of our teenagers around the things identified there around responsibility, around the power of effective communication, around stimulus response, taking a breath, making choices. So we've now delivered the programme to 3 cohorts of students, and we've seen great impact from those students. The feedback was really strong. They came to it from 5 different schools in pairs, so they didn't know each other, which for a 17-year-old is tricky in itself. And all spoke about the power of the content. And I expect we'll go a little bit more into the particular aspects that they identified. Yeah. So what we're trying to do now is that we are aware that we could reach more of our students. So we've got some very talented staff in a couple of our high schools, secondary schools, who've been through PLP. One of them is now actually a certified trainer as well. And we're looking and working with you on how we can try and design elements of the PLP within the PSHE curriculum so that we can approach more children and younger children potentially with some of the principles and thinking. So that's where we're at. It's definitely a work in progress. The shoots are good, looking strong, and we're looking for ways to expand.
I mean, I just think it's so exciting that it's the young people for me, that it could have such an amazing impact. Just share with us a little bit of the feedback. What are the young people saying they're either doing differently? What's the impact, and what can you see that's different?
Yeah, so I've asked the students for feedback, obviously, immediately afterwards and subsequently, and I've also asked the teachers that they work with in schools. Because one of the things for me that was really important, that we didn't just deliver the PLP to these groups of students, but actually they had people in schools that they could then go to and talk to about the content. So that's where we've kind of got our feedback from. So the main thing that struck us from the collective feedback was this focus on being aware that you have a choice in situations, that the responsibility actually lies with you and you can claim that responsibility. So I think young people are increasingly impacted by the choices and influences of other people, and this sort of the struggling mental health challenges in schools are often around people wondering where they fit in groups as a single person. Are they brave enough to stand aside from peer groups? How could they make their friendships stronger, because they know that that's a facilitating factor in life? So actually being able to reflect on their own responsibility, stimulus response, take a breath before you fire a response back, either verbally or online, because actually think about the outcome you want rather than the immediate response. So you can stop and make a choice. They talked about how it's affected their communication within their friendship groups. So they're now more able to make conscious decisions to listen and to bring people in and to notice who's potentially on the outside of friendship groups, which makes things work more smoothly. They've talked about reflecting on their working habits within their schools. So actually their responsibility is for the choices they make subsequently. And if they're having a tough time at school with work or whatever, then actually what can they do about that? How can they seek support and guidance and help, rather than almost sitting in the struggle of it and keeping quiet for whatever reason it is? So this sort of almost a confidence to step out of the previous way they were living their lives. And we chose to deliver the programme to students in year 12 who are between 16 and 17. And that's the year in school leading up to when you make choices about onward steps. So choices for university or other routes into work. And one of the students was definitely reconsidering her options and said, we delivered it in the summer, so she was going to rethink over the summer and talk with her family about choices and about whether she could push herself a bit harder. So reach different levels than she maybe had set herself the ceiling. There was another young person who spoke about the fact that she'd reflected on her role as a young carer and how this was enabling her to have conversations with her mum about herself and in a deeper way than she'd been able to do before. So confidence in the way she expressed herself as well.
I mean, to me, to have achieved that with a group of young people in those short 3 days is pretty bloody unbelievable. I mean, one of the things that you and I talked about when we last had a conversation, and this is one of the things that probably I'm excited about, but you hadn't thought to begin to measure this yet, is how much influence do you think that they then might choose to have on the younger children? So you're almost teaching them how important it is to be able to mentor them. And I just want to pick up on a sentence that you said earlier, which to me is key, and yet people forget this. You said very present in the moment. And that's one of the things that people forget so much of the time. They spend their time worrying about what they've done before and could they have done it differently, or worried about the future and what might happen. If that's where your attention is, that's where you are. You're not in the present moment. And yet the only place that you can make change or actually do something is in the present moment. You can't do it in the past. You can't do it in the future. And we forget that. And I think with the young people who've been through, I think that feedback is pretty phenomenal for 16, 17-year-olds. But I wonder if there's even more we might be able to help them do if they begin to recognize the influence that they may be able to have on the young people who are coming up the level below them. I hate the word below, but behind them, however you choose to phrase it. Because one of the things you talked about confidence, you talked about them communicating differently, you talked about responsibility. I have to say, I think that for young people today, and I'm a long way away from having any sort of the experience they do, is with all the social media and the pressure that puts on is phenomenal. And the challenge I think they have that's so big is that they begin to take what other people think of them as gospel. And being able to say, hang on a minute, what other people think of me, what other people perceive of me, that's nothing to do with me. Nothing, that's their stuff. And being able to take greater ownership for how we choose to respond when things are posted that are not useful and not get sucked in, I think is huge.
Yes.
Absolutely huge. I mean, what sort of challenges are you finding with all the young people now on social media?
They're competing for headspace. That's the first thing. Young people are spending hours and hours on phones, and actually to the detriment of human interactions, if you like. I know that interactions on social media are human, but they're not present, and they're not the day-to-day communications on which people survive. People thrive and survive and thrive. So one is a simple thing about time, but the big one really, as you've referred to, is the influence of the perfect world that's seen out there, and this constant feeling of, am I living up to that? Is my life as exciting as that? And of course, we as teachers and parents can say to children and young people all the time, that's not the real world. People post what they want you to see, but still it has an impact. And I think it has an impact on social groupings, because you know, when you and I were at school, Penny, if we had difficult things that went on with friendship groups or with learning during the day, we went home and actually that was the end of it until the next day. So we could seek support at home, choose to talk about it or not. But actually now this goes on 24/7. So they arrive home, the things still continue. They don't get respite from it. So actually anything that promotes young people to be able to step back, to step away from it and make decisions about whether they're disappearing into those thoughts or not is really helpful. We've also found post-COVID, and you know, we're very aware that we need to move on from COVID because it's so many years ago now, but we have found definitely a weakening resilience in young people. Not everybody, obviously, but more students have poorer resilience and they're more easily knocked back than they were before COVID. And I think that's due to the period of disruption, routines, different social interaction to the usual school day. So we're finding in some of our schools, probably across the board, that we've got groups of young people coming through now who find it really hard to pick themselves up after challenges or disappointments. And I think that the social media use exacerbates that, because you can fall into a situation where you think that you're constantly failing. Yeah, so it's very challenging for young people.
How long ago did this group that you were talking about actually go through the program?
So we ran the groups in the last academic year, so January of last year. So now those groups are in year 13. So they've got their heads down, ready to finish their A-level courses this year. So their choices for university have been made, and yeah, that's where they're up to.
Can you look at them now and say that you can see that they have had a different experience that's enabled them to just live their life in a little bit happier, better way?
So I think personally, I haven't had individual conversations with those students at that depth, because we tend to work through our schools. But I have had written feedback a couple of occasions, and there's definitely feedback that they're feeling the changes a bit further on. But I think your point is a really good one about, as we've done with our rollout to our staff, how do we continue to ensure that these things are embedded? Because there's no point going on the PLP and not following it up. So I think as we move forward, and ideally we roll it out to more students, the vision is that we'll set up networks within schools so that we can have members of staff who've been through PLP and aware of it, who are actually practicing some of these things within the classrooms in which they're leaders. All our teachers are leaders within classrooms. And then students are experiencing it from their leaders within their classrooms, but also from mentors, ideally, within the school who've been through the PLP. So that way we infiltrate the messages, and it becomes the culture, doesn't it? That's what we're all working towards.
Yeah, I'm curious. You're talking about a heck of a lot of schools. But what do you think the impact might be on the schools and on individuals if every child at that level across those 39 schools could have the experience of going through the program? What do you think the impact would be?
Well, to clarify, within the 39, we've only got 5 high schools. So the others are primaries. And I think the primary schools are a different ball game. I think we influence by our behaviour in the primary schools rather than the overt messages of the programme going to students.
Yeah.
But I think if we were able to have the PLP as part of a year 12 programme across all of our high schools, it would make a huge difference. It really would.
What difference do you think it could make?
I think that we would see an increase in resilience. I think we would see an increase in positive well-being. I think we'd see groups of students who are consistently have the tools with which they can communicate more effectively with people. We all know that, you know, as you go through adolescence, you often struggle with that whole thing about communication, with, you know, struggling with your hormonal changes and competing sort of calls for your attention. So I think that it would enable students who are coming through and thinking about next steps to actually be in a really good position for communicating well and for taking responsibility for their own decisions.
So I'm curious, what is it that holds you back from doing exactly that now?
If I'm brutally honest, Penny, there's two things. Firstly, it's no surprise, I expect, to anybody listening that the funding that's available for this within our schools is limited. So the programme does cost to deliver to small groups. It's an intensive programme, and it assures the quality of it. So there are cost implications when heads are having to make very difficult decisions about prioritising funds on a daily basis. And I think that if we were able to access additional funds to support us and the delivery of programmes, that would be great. I think that we specifically chose year 12 because in year 12, you do have a little bit more flexibility with time away from the curriculum. You know, A-level programmes are tough and require a lot of hours. So actually to enable students to be released for 3 full days would potentially be a barrier, but I think in year 12, that would be okay. So essentially it's resourcing and it's logistics. Which is why we've started to think about whether we can use some adapted materials in a resilience programme that could be spread over a number of weeks within the allocation for personal, social and health education. But these are all areas that we're exploring.
Okay, but I mean, the obvious thing and the easy thing, well, there's 2 different routes really, one of which is probably going to be even more difficult. How much are you involving any of the parents in the children that you're taking through the programme?
So far, not very much. So the parents obviously have been told about the programme for the students that have come through. They've had information about it and they've given consent, because we still need parental consent to involve children and young people in anything additional to the school curriculum. So that's all we've done so far with those groups.
Okay. How easy, or is there an opportunity to see if you can actually get sponsorship from people all around your area? I mean, nearly all people in big companies well, a lot of them will have got young children. A lot of them will have got children at your school. So how many of them would say, wow, this is an opportunity that will give my child the opportunity to maybe get a better job, maybe be more confident in themselves better, all of those things. How easy would it be to get sponsorship for, you know, companies who are saying, wow, this is well worth looking at?
Yeah. So a few months ago, I applied an empowering question to this very problem. Just if we knew we could, what would we need to do? What are the first few steps we would take? So if you cast your mind back, the first step was, and the idea actually, it had been there as a seed in my mind from our earlier conversations going back a few years, but actually it was one of our teachers in one of our schools who came on a programme who contacted me at the end of day 3 and just said, we need to do this with some of our students. So she added some fire to my belly in that regard. So what would we need to do? I had a conversation with you
Yeah.
And subsequently, what we've been doing is putting together, with the help of a fantastic colleague, who David Hancock, who I met through you, who runs a media company. He's been working with us on a media pack, which we are about to send out to local businesses. And the vision really is that ideally, if we knew we could, would be great if we had larger businesses in the Northeast who would have that investment in, and motivated by the reasons you've just said, who would pair up with one of our high schools. So we'd be looking at 5 investors essentially, who would then say, well, we'll fund a program or 2 over this year and next year, so that then we could really build momentum and get more and more compelling feedback from the cohorts rather than from individual students. And those would be the potential employees of the future. So in theory, it would provide sort of channels and pathways through for some of our young people into those local businesses.
Okay, that's kind of interesting. Well, one of the things I'd say now, which I probably would have been useful, I'd said earlier, if anybody who is listening to this has got any thoughts about places that Nicola might be able to approach, companies, or anything where you think this interests you and you'd like to be able to contribute in some way to helping young people really have a bigger opportunity in life. Let me just say, I believe passionately that if they've been through this program, they will have a higher chance of being able to handle interviews and going into their first role, understanding when they go to the workplace more about the most useful way to behave and be, to be able to develop their own potential. So if anybody's got any thoughts about this, please do. You can either email me, penny@thelivingleader.com, or Nicola, where would you like people to contact you?
I'm happy if they come through you, Penny, actually. That would be great.
Okay.
The Living Leader. Yeah,
okay.
In the first instance. Yeah.
Fine. But anybody who's got any questions now, while we're online, just please type them in the chat box or whatever it is, however you do it. I'm not a techie whiz, but just put in any questions that you have, anything that you might like to ask Nicola now. If not, you can always put it on later and either I or Nicola will answer. I mean, I think, Nicola, that this is amazing. What is your own personal vision for the future?
Well, like you, I would like to see it rolled out so that at some point in their secondary school life with us at Bishop Bewick, they were able to experience the PLP, the content of the PLP, either in the 3 days or in a different format that we work out together over time. And I would like to see that, because what we're experiencing as we take staff through the programme is that there's a real tide of enthusiasm and rethinking and reframing communication and the power of people. I mean, our trust is a trust where schools already work very well together, and we've got some all of our schools are fantastic communities with a strong sense of belonging. But I think our heads would say, this is changing me. I'm realizing now that I did that the other day, and actually that was just totally the wrong thing to do. And one head famously, and I quoted all the time, after she'd done the program, she emailed me about 3 days later and she said, I just can't stop asking empowering questions. And I've realized that I set up a system in my school for managing a particular problem. And then I realized that actually it was only 1 or 2 people that I needed to target. So actually now I've just abandoned that system, because why was I using the sledgehammer to crack the nut? It's literally, we're getting examples of people that we can share. They should be written within the Living Leader training manual now, really, because they're really concrete examples of how things have changed and how some tricky situations in schools have been diffused based on heads rethinking how to approach them. So I think that we're a very good sort of foundation. We've got a good foundation level now with so many of our leaders and teachers going through the programme, so that the FLP isn't delivered in isolation. So we're actually, the vision is that the students who go through will have a network of support around them within their schools.
You see, I think that's great. I mean, it's no one short that you'll find there's a lot of the teachers that as they go through the program, they realize that they were managing, not leading, through caring.
Yeah.
If you think about it, and forgive me for sharing this because people may have heard me say it before, but I just think it's so important to share it. If you think about how we're conditioned towards managing, not leading, it becomes very easy to understand. Excuse me. So why does it happen? When you're at school, when you're anywhere, what you're being told all the time is how to do this, how to do that, how to do everything else. And that's what a teacher feels they're there for. But just think about any organization, doesn't matter where you go. Let's say you're a good lawyer, or you're a good salesperson, or it could be you're a good teacher, you're good something. And you're so good that one day somebody says, you're so brilliant, we're going to promote you. So you're now going to have people reporting to you. And you go home on Friday as this salesperson, engineer, lawyer, whatever, teacher, whatever you happen to be. And you come back on Monday as a manager, and there's meant to have been some sort of instant osmosis over the weekend that now you know how to manage. And of course, you haven't got a bloody clue, but everything in you says, I care. It's now down to me to motivate people. It's down to me to have all the answers. It's down to me to direct them, to make sure that they do the best they can. It drives you completely in the direction of managing. But all the time you think like that, what you're doing, you're taking responsibility for them. And nearly always when I ran programs, one of the questions I used to ask people is say, tell me, how many of you believe that your role is to motivate your teams? 9 out of 10 hands would go up all the time. And I say, I'm sorry, I can't agree with you. That's not your role at all. Your role is to inspire them to motivate themselves. And if you keep giving people advice because you care, because you think that's what your role is in life, what you're doing is educating them that they can't do it without you, that literally, if you think it, they can never be better than you were yesterday, and you're educating them how not to think for themselves, which is utterly crazy. And, you know, that's what happens. And it's not always this is true, but most of the time it's because people care. I know that until I began to learn this, and this I didn't learn till I was very late, by which time my kids had grown up, I never stopped giving advice to people because I cared, because if people came to me with a problem, I thought my role was to solve it for them, to advise them the best way to deal with it. Who the hell I thought I was that I had all this amazing knowledge, I don't know, but that's what I thought my role was. And it absolutely wasn't. And until I really learned this, it's why I say that even after I developed my program and I launched it, it was only in that first year of delivering my program that I began to realize I really hadn't understood leadership at its most profound level. I hadn't, you know, and even now, and I know with my children, even now, having been doing this for 30 years, there's still the temptation to give advice when they're in trouble. That I don't think it ever goes away because you love them, because you care. And it's bloody hard to say, no, that's the worst thing I can do. I need to ask questions. So you're absolutely right when you were saying if all the teachers understood this and the ones who've been through the program are beginning to handle things a bit differently, like that head said to you, rather than giving advice, you're in the present moment and you're asking questions. You're immediately going in, what's the thing I need to do here? And for those teachers who learn that and really get it, because it's only through caring we keep giving advice, and then get very skilled at asking questions, that's what can have the impact. Huge. So it would be very interesting. Of course, this is what's so difficult. You can't almost get this feedback. But it would be very interesting to know if the young people saw a difference in their teachers who've been through the program from the way they were before. But I don't know if you can get that feedback. But it would be very interesting to know.
Yes, it would. Yeah, this is why it's exciting to be in the early stages of this work, Penny, isn't it? Because actually there are all sorts of avenues for depth of progression and feedback. And I mean, I would say that our schools teachers now are really well trained and confident in developing curiosity in young people. So, you know, questions are encouraged. But that thing about intrinsic motivation is a really good thing to just keep pushing and pushing. How can we get young people to be really motivated from within themselves? Some are, many are, but some find it really difficult for whatever reason. So if the program, because you know, one of the words you used there was motivation, one of the programs, one of the key things there, the impacts would be if we find that some of our harder to reach students are more motivated because they're more aware of the responsibility that they can take themselves, with the support of those around them to help them find the route by which they can do that. So yes, it's all very interesting.
I know. So if you had a choice right now, okay, who would you take through first? The teachers, the rest of the teachers, or the young people?
Nothing's black and white, Penny. Nothing's black and white. Lots of both. Lots of both. But in a fairly targeted and strategic way, so that we would have potentially more, because we have some schools where more of the leaders and teachers have gone through. So actually, I think building up the student cohorts within those schools, we would see the fastest impact of the whole thing married together, if you see what I mean, on which to model.
Interesting response. But another thing I'd like to ask you these impossible questions. If you could involve the parents more, how would you like to involve the parents?
Oh, I think we would bring parents together, or have some sort of information sharing session, questions, so that they were more aware of the content of the programme. Because yes, absolutely right, our young people spend 6 or 7 hours a day in school and the rest of time out of school, and they're probably not with their parents all of that time, but parents are still very influential in lives, aren't they, all the way up through the age group of students that we're thinking about. So I think we do need to get parents very much included.
So if you knew you could do that right now, what's the first steps you'd take?
We'd set up another couple of programs, and we would have parents meetings for the students that we were going to offer to take through, or suggest to take them through.
Okay. If you had the option to actually take 10 parents through the program, how might you approach that?
It could be done. It could be done.
Would it be worth? I mean, I'm really curious, because I don't know if you know this, but my vision has been always, from the time I first designed the program, it's always been, I would like this to be part of school curriculum. That would be, for me, I would be able to go off in my box knowing that I'd achieved something amazing, because it would give young people the best possible chance, I believe, in life. Now, the reason that I kept holding back was there was one school that said, we'd like you to do a pilot of taking some young people through, and we did a couple of programs. And I went to meet them probably about 3 months after they'd been through the program. They loved it. They thought it was absolutely amazing. And we got some feedback that really worried me. One of the things we talk about, I said, wouldn't it, people, they'd learn to be more kind. Doesn't matter how you describe it, but you begin to look for the good things that people do and tell them, so that you're not focusing on what they're doing wrong, you're focusing on what they're doing well. And one of the 16-year-old lads came back, and he was mortified because he realized that a lot of the time he was taking his parents for granted. So he decided to go back and be really kind and say, look, I know that at times I'm a pain and I'm this and I'm that and I'm everything else. And he said, I just want to tell you that I really do appreciate you. I know that how much you do for me. And anyway, he went out of his way to say whatever he said. And the parents just came back, or one of them came back, the father or the mother, and said, what are you on about? Don't be so bloody stupid. And it absolutely shook him, because here he thought he was doing something that was right and got put down. And that made me really twitchy, really twitchy. So I began to think, well, unless we've got either a teacher, or a parent who's been through the program, is there a risk that we're teaching the young person something that they then want to adopt that as a behavior and as a learning, but the parent or the teacher are trying to stuff them back in the box again? And that could have a bigger negative impact. And that's why I've held back, which is why I think it's wonderful that you've taken so many teachers through. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg. Which do you do first? You know, do you take only the children through where the teacher's been through the program and understands what they're trying to do, and can then very much go into asking wonderful, empowering questions to help them stay focused on the new behaviors? Or do you just take a chance, and even if the teacher doesn't understand or the parents don't understand? That's always been my dilemma. How do you do it so they get support afterwards? I'd love to know what your thoughts are about that.
So I understand the risk, Penny, and I think it's absolutely flattening to a child or young person if they have that response from their parent. I think that to get the widest impact, you would take all the parents through at the same time as the students. I think, though, that because we're education establishments, we are very focused on the holistic development of children and young people. But actually, we also, one of our mission statements across the Trust is that a great education can transform lives. And while I take your point that education is wider than school, we need to stay focused on the transformational power of what we can offer children, young people. So, because we know when we look at some of our students who come from significant disadvantage and homes where they experience considerable poverty and the stresses and strains that puts on families, that actually those students are really deserving of these opportunities, and they shouldn't be excluded from that because their parents can't engage in a similar process or haven't got the resources within themselves to take on board the messages. That we wouldn't want to not deliver the messages to students because there was a risk it wouldn't be fulfilled at home.
Well, I think it's absolutely spot on, and it is a difficult one. And I just need to take a pause. And I have to put my glasses on because we've had, this is lovely. We've had a comment come up from Christine. I've loved this conversation. So good to see Nicola again, to hear about the impact of the PLP on young people. So inspiring to hear the possibilities, and I hope sponsorship can be secured soon. I can't help wanting to ask a question of her local businesses. If you knew that you could be part of creating a legacy of positive impact on young people in the Northeast, how soon will you choose to get in touch with Nicola? There we go.
Lovely, Christine. Thank you.
Yeah. You know, there's a question, and I've already thought of one organisation that I think is very important that you approach. So I will let you have that. I think it would be well worthwhile you approaching them.
Yes, that's a really good question to put in our, because David and I are working on a kind of covering text to go with the media pack is created. So that's a really good question, Christine. I need to record it. Can we get it recorded?
Well, it'll stay up on here on LinkedIn, so you'll be able to
Okay.
you'll be able to get it down afterwards.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think that sponsorship is probably the only way, but then you have to think about, if you're going to do that, are you going to step out of your current role and become somebody who just delivers programs? You know, what are you going to do? Because you can't take teachers basically out of their role. We could say, let's train 6 more teachers to deliver the program. When are they going to have the bloody time to do it?
Yes.
You know, because they're
absolutely right.
teaching.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen? You know, you're
Yeah.
not like a big corporate. When we roll out in some companies, some of the big corporates, they take some people, 6, 8, 10 people out of their current role, and all they do is deliver programs. We can't do that with a teacher. You know, the backfill of taking on another teacher would cost you even more. So
Yes.
the reality is you can't do it.
And that's why we need to make sure that what we choose to do, we do fairly small and manageable to start with, so that we can really focus on it and make it the best it can be. I'm not someone who wants to scattergun and say, okay, oh gosh, look at this blue sky, thinking we've got a £1,000, let's just do as many programs as we can for as many students as quickly as we can, because actually we need that longitudinal depth. We need the thinking about where are they going to get the opportunities to embed, and where are we going to get the opportunities to feed back to others about impact. So we need to go steadily in a progressive line and get the biggest impact.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think it would be very easy to say, we've got 20 grand, let's take X amount of pupils through. But to me, the real importance is, how can you get them to hold on to it?
Yeah.
How can you get them to live and breathe it, so they've got another year at school that they're really thinking about, okay, what impact can I have on myself and on other people by behaving differently? What opportunities that I may not have recognized before are now in front of me, that I have the confidence to step forward and go for. You know, unless you can get them to hold on to the new behaviors, as you say, it'll be a scattergun approach that doesn't have the depth to then embed and move on.
Yeah.
So let's assume for the moment, Nicola, that we're going to have a lot of people who are going to listen to this because they're going to want to know more. If you could give some really important thoughts that you think is going to benefit people as parents or as teachers, what might you say to them that you want to leave them thinking about, where if they just shift a behavior in a little way could make a huge difference?
Good question. So I'm going into my parent mode now, because there are definitely some key things that I think have changed the way I parent since I've been through the program. And one of those is really consciously stepping away from the advice monster. So when my children over the last few years have come to me with issues, I have really consciously and intentionally said, tell me more. Tell me more about that. What do you actually want from me here, ultimately? Not in a confrontational way, but do you want me to tell you what to do? Or shall we just talk through the problem and you can find your next steps? And I think that's made a huge difference to my children at the age they're at. And I also think reflecting all the time on give and get. because a lot of the time, you know, when the children were younger, and even now, and in friendships as well, I look back and think, oh, I'm still now. What am I going to get out of this? I'm going to get some accolades. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get that. I'm furious because I didn't get what I wanted or thought the outcome would be. And actually reel back in and try and see it from the other person's perspective. That's been intentionally thinking about that has been also a life changer.
If I asked your children if they've seen a change in you, what do you think they'd say?
I think they would say yes, because they start to now occasionally, if I go into that mode, they start rolling their eyes and going, oh, here we go, living leader. So, yeah, absolutely living leader. But I can see them responding differently to things. I can see them thinking about problems rather than just the autopilot. And I, just after I'd done the program, Penny, my son stood in the kitchen. He'll kill me if he's listening to this. He stood in the kitchen, and he was, I'm ashamed to say, he was 22 at this point. And I said, can you just cut the peppers and put them in the frying pan? And he picked up the pepper and he said, how do I do that? He lived at university for 3 years. And I just thought, right, instead of this, think about stimulus response, instead of the, what on earth are you talking about? I just said, well, if you knew you could, in 30 seconds, have that chopped up in pieces in that pan, what would you do first? And he said, well, he picked up the knife and he said, well, I suppose I'd chop off that stalk on the end. Yeah. And I just did that constant, yeah, lovely. Bit my tongue. We had the chopped pepper in the pan. So this is a very real thing. And I try and do that. I try and do that still, and they definitely do notice the difference.
It is funny, isn't it? Because the temptation is always just to give advice. Why? It's a bloody sight quicker.
Yeah.
You know, just say do that, but recognizing that we haven't thought of the long term. I'm always going to have to tell them how to do it because they won't remember. You know, and oh no, it's crazy. It's crazy.
That just reinforces the message that we know best. Whether we do that at work or at home, it just is a constant reminder that we think we actually know best, and we don't. Many times.
Exactly. Many times we don't. It's quite right. Any other things, Nicola, that you might, any pearls of wisdom that you'd like to share with anybody?
I just want to share that I continue to absolutely delight in delivering the program and seeing and hearing the things that people say afterwards. I've got so many messages in my inbox, really powerful messages of people who've been through the program and talking about significant changes in their personal lives and in their home lives. So I think the pearl of wisdom would just be to open your minds to the thinking and read around it and notice things around you, and notice things you appreciate, because it's tough sometimes.
Nicola, I can't believe an hour has gone. Yeah. It's gone so quickly, but I want to say thank you so much. And I really hope that we do get lots of people sending in questions saying, how can I get my young people to go through this program? You know, and how could we get it into our school, be it a state school, be it a public school, whatever? How can we bring this program in so that young people get the best possible chance going forward? Or indeed, even how can we bring it in because we think our teachers would gain so much? So please, anybody who's got any questions, please just either put them up on LinkedIn, which is where this is. So put the questions up, or email me, penny@thelivingleader.com, and any for Nicola, I will forward straight on to her. So Nicola, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And we will see you again very soon.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye, Penny.